Welcome to Felony Friday, a presentation of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, John Odermatt.
All right, my guest today on Felony Friday is Quawntay Bosco Adams. Quawntay spent 28 of his first 45 years of life confined in cells in juvenile county, state, and federal detention facilities. However, he's rewriting his story now, and he's also looking through his story, to inspire change and hope. Back in May of 2006, he was facing an impending conviction, and he actually escaped from a maximum security detention facility. And he was not captured not long after that, but the escape caught the attention of people worldwide and really gained a following from that. Fast forward more recently, January 2020, Quante discovered a loophole in the law that would help him to change his own story. He ended up firing his court-appointed attorney, fought for his own freedom, and he was granted his immediate release in July of this year, July 24th. He is the author of Chasin Freedum, which was optioned for a feature film, which I believe already began production. We'll talk about that. Quante, welcome to Felony Friday.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Glad
to have you here, man. And, you're a fascinating guy. You've led there's a lot to talk about that you've gone through in your life. And, reading through your biography and seeing where you began, obviously the thing that's captured a lot of attention is your, escape from prison. And then, just recently, fighting for your own freedom and getting released from prison in July of this year. Just amazing story. So before we get into all of that, what I like to do with my guests is really kind of set the table and let people know, where things began, so they can get a sense for you as a person. So if you could just share, kind of starting out in your childhood, what did your childhood look like in your early years?
I was born in Compton, California. My family and environment was, at that time, it was the 70s. So, it was right at the beginning of the gang culture. Most of my family, father and everybody, they were Crips from Compton. And so my childhood was a little bit different. A lot different than most other children. I wasn't raised to be a child, so to speak. I kind of grew up fast and had like a wise soul and did things that most people as a child didn't do. Like, for instance, I started selling drugs when I was about 10 years old. And
Wow.
And a lot of that was pretty much due to my circumstances, environments, and the decisions I made because, like I said, I was surrounded by it. It was like, that's all I saw. That's all I knew. So it was like, it was normal. I honestly didn't see anything else. So you can kind of say that I was kind of like educated and taught to, step outside of the bounds of the law at a young age. So,
So was that, kind of just a natural step, in a lot of, I guess, more normal situations. I hate to use that word, but, people would look at going out, getting a job. That was just your next step.
That was pretty much normal for my environment. And it's like, I can kind of look back and say, like, honestly, that in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, I rarely saw people get up in the morning and go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a child, I was always curious. And but one thing is I never liked to ask questions. So I used to try to, come up with conclusions and answers to all of the thoughts that's running through my head on my own. And so at a young age, to me, when I started seeing the things that were taking place in my community, the crime, the drug dealing, the lack of employment, uh, I started to believe that that right there was what being a black child in America was supposed to be. That was like the only picture that I had of a black person. I didn't have any role models, or most kids have people who they look up to that are productive as role models. I never had any of that. I never seen any of that. So with that said, my childhood was kind of like distorted uh, a lot more than most other children uh, growing up at that time, and a lot of it was based on the things that I was exposed to. Like again, like I say, my entire family were Crips. My father was one of the original Compton Crips. Those are the men who I saw. Those were the people who I looked up to. So starting at a young age, they were the ones who pretty much gave me my identity of what and who I am supposed to be as a man and as a person. Mm-hmm. And so pretty much to answer your question, my childhood was it was different. It was a lot different than most other children, and it was definitely not what a childhood is supposed to be like.
So taken from the biography you sent me here, so age of 10, you start selling drugs. You started driving. Is that right? You started driving at age 11?
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was great. Actually, I bought my first car before I even knew how to drive. And
how did that happen?
But like I said, I started selling drugs around that time. So I would sit out there in the projects and in the parking lot and make several $100s a day just selling drugs. And I had so much money, and I've seen everybody else had cars and all that, so I wanted me a car. So I had a cousin in Watts who actually had a car for sale. So me and my sister caught the bus over there. I bought the car, and she drove it home for me, right? And I never let my mother know, because at the time, my father had been out of my life or whatever. So I pretty much grew up just with my mother and my two sisters. And so we drove the car back to the apartments we lived in and parked it in the back. And I never told my mother that I actually had the car at the time. So just every day I would go out back and I would just start the car up and, just start playing around with it. And I taught myself how to drive. Next thing you know, I'm driving around the block and I'm getting on the freeway, and from that point on, I was just, and by that time it had came out. So she knew that I had a car and was driving it. So I went from that car to started buying more cars and customizing them. And that's how it was. I was a lot more advanced than
Did you ever get pulled over when you were that young?
Yeah, I got pulled over a lot of times. Sometimes I actually went to jail. They took me down to the police station, called my mother to come get me, towed the car. Sometimes they would just take the keys from me.
Wow. So you're driving at the age of 11. You dropped out of school at 13. And then, you said you got arrested a couple times for driving the car. What was your first drug arrest?
My first drug arrest was when I was 13. I was standing out in the parking lot in the projects, selling rocks, crack. Had some crack rocks on me. Police swooped up. I threw the rocks. He saw me, went and found them, took me to jail. Mother came and got me out of jail. I had to go back and forth to court, and eventually, I think it took like a little more than a year through the court processes, and I was sent to juvenile camp. But that came after I committed another crime. So they kind of grouped it all together and sent me to juvenile, like boot camp.
How much time did you spend there?
6 months.
6 months, and you came back. Did you? I mean, did you go back to that juvenile camp, or just the 6 months?
Nah, I I did 6 months. What happened was I was another drug arrest. I got caught up in this undercover sting where police, undercover cops dressed up like gang members came to purchase drugs from me, and
Mm-hmm.
it happened to result in a shootout
Wow.
with the cops, and so I was arrested for that. And somebody else who was actually with me at the time was seriously engaged in the shootout. He was arrested, and I went to trial for that, and pretty much got found not guilty because they identity issues at the time. They actually arrested somebody else. I actually got away. I ran from the scene, got away. The guy who was with me was arrested, and they arrested another guy on the scene also. And the cops identified the other guy who happened to look just like me, because we all used to dress alike back then. And the cops identified him as me. And so later on, when they actually caught me, they found out that that guy wasn't the person. And then later on, like a week or two later, when they caught me and I went to trial, my lawyer brought that up, that, you know, they identified several other people. So pretty much I kind of weaseled out of that and was sentenced for the drugs that I had got caught with a year prior that I told you about earlier. And they sent me to the little boot camp for 6 months. I think I got out of boot camp for about 3 months. And after that, I went back to the California Youth Authority, in which I was sentenced to a life sentence in the California Youth Authority for a robbery. And when I was in the California Youth Authority,
You were sentenced to a life sentence? What?
yeah, at the time, the way the court process worked in California was that anybody under the age of 16, you're in the juvenile court. You can't be, back then, you couldn't be tried as an adult unless you were actually 16, and you had to go through a process. At the time, I was actually 14 when I committed the crime. So I remained in the juvenile court, and the juvenile court found me guilty. A judge trial found me guilty, and they sentenced me to life in the California Youth Authority. And at the time, a life sentence in the California Youth Authority was until you turn 25. So once you turn 25, then you pretty much, your custody in the youth authority is pretty much complete and terminated. So at that time, I was sent to the California Youth Authority for a life sentence. And the thing about it, though, is every year you go before the parole board, and they have the option of letting you go before your 25th birthday. And so, I mean, it's crazy. Like, my entire youth and childhood was pretty much wasted behind bars because of, all my criminal activity in life.
What was your mindset back then towards everything that was happening? I mean, spending all this time being detained, selling drugs. What was your attitude like? Once you got out, what were you looking forward to?
When I got out, which time?
When you released at the age of 19?
Okay, now see, that's a whole nother story there, is because actually when I was 17 and I was in the California Youth Authority,
Okay.
A friend of mine and we actually assaulted some guards at the jail. We assaulted a guard at the jail in the California Youth Authority. And a woman counselor happened to be, she got, kind of got, not beat up bad, but, she got hit. And so we were placed in solitary confinement because you had to understand, like back then, my life was I was wild. As a juvenile, I was completely wild. I didn't have any type of conscious about anything that I was doing. I was following the footsteps of people who I looked up to, and some of these guys, like, they were just like monsters, and I wanted to be just like them, and that's what I thought was the epitome of being a man, to be an active gang member, and drug dealer and doing those type of things, because that is literally, I swear, that is all I saw. I didn't see anything else. I didn't know anything else. I didn't know how to read, write, or none of that. All I saw was going on in the projects, in Compton, in the hood, and that was our lifestyle. So I didn't know anything else. But when this assault happened in the California Youth Authority, and I was placed in solitary confinement, that was the first time in my life where I was able to do some introspection. I was able to think. I was able to look at myself. You see it? And like, I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed of the fact that, that a woman had actually got hit, during this assault, because I come up from, mother and two sisters. I grew up around women, female. And so even as a gangster, there was one thing that was never tolerated, and that was never acceptable, and that's that, you would actually put your hands on a woman. And so when I was in solitary confinement at that time, my conscience ate me up. I mean, it was every day. It's like I'm fighting and arguing with the guards. They're shooting tear gas in my cell every day. They would strip me naked every day. I'm kicking on the doors. I'm screaming at them. They spit in my food. They put pepper spray in my food. And so I was just like this little angry, frustrated kid at 17 years old. And at the same time, my conscience is eating away at me because of the fact that I don't agree with what just happened. An assault, a staff assault that I was involved in. We actually intended to assault this male guard, but a female guard was actually present too. And she got assaulted too. And so that right there is just like, it fucked me up. And so every day I'm battling with the guards, and I'm battling with my conscience about the fact of what we just done, And so it's like, it ate me up so much to where I was like this little angry old kid. And one day I looked in the mirror, and I just looked like shit. And I told myself, man, it's like something just clicked in my head, and like, look, man, you are some shit. For real, I told myself, I'm like, man, you are some shit. So either you're going to continue to be some shit, or you're going to try to do something to become better. And so from that day on, it's like, it's crazy. I can't really explain it, but I just clicked. It's just like, I did, just like my attitude and perception kind of shifted at that moment, because it ate me up so much that the only way I could feel a little bit of peace with myself was to acknowledge that, look, man, I'm some shit. And the thing that I've been doing are some things that a man shouldn't be doing, or anybody with some type of substance shouldn't be doing. And so I did a lot of introspection, a lot of, from that day on, I would just sit up and think and lay back and kind of like question, where I was going in life and the things that I had been through in life. And from that, I just started to evolve. And from that, the guards even started to see the change, because I would no longer sit at the door and scream and kick on it and argue with them when they would, shoot gas into my cell and stuff. It got to the point to where I would just sit there and just take it, because I was at the point now, like, I'm not getting anywhere fighting, and that I needed to come up with a way to where I can be in control of my own emotions without letting the guards be in control, because I found that I was pretty much being a puppet, and that if they came and shot some pepper spray in my cell, now I'm just this erratic person, and
Yeah.
I didn't agree with it. So, I got a little more self-composure and started being a little more conscious of the things that I were doing, and took a little more control over myself. And they recognized that. And so surprisingly, they bagged up on the things that they were doing. And all of a sudden,
Wow.
I started getting books. And this was the first time that I ever really had a book, right?
Huh.
So I'm 17 years old. I don't know how to read, really, And so I get a dictionary and I get a novel. And it happened to be like a Jackie Collins novel or something back then. But I just started reading that. And then when I was reading that, I was able to see that there was another world out there other than the world in life that I had thought only existed for me in the ghetto. I started reading other books and started learning about, Black culture and history, and realized that, me as a young Black man, that there was something to be more of value to who I was than what I had been taught or misled to believe in. And from there on, I just started devouring books and started changing my attitude and perception on life. And I pretty much made like a 180-degree turn, right? So what happened after that was I ended up going to court for the assault, pled guilty to 3 years in California Department of Corrections. So they took me out of the California Youth Authority, placed me into the California Department of Corrections. Now I'm 17 years old, but I'm in here with grown, old, violent gangsters now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so once I got there, I pretty much continued, because fortunately I was surrounded with some older guys who were pretty much seasoned and understood that, education was more important than anything. So I developed that little structure there. I think I did like 21 months in level 4 yard in Calipatria, California Department of Corrections. And I was released out to society at the age of 19. But now the thing is that, so when I was released from society, I was a totally different man. The guy that I was before, I was no longer that person. Even the people in my neighborhood looked at me different. I went from wearing all black to wearing light color. I went from being looking like a gang member to now looking like a square, and I started going to this a vocation school where I was learning about electronic and computer technology. I was doing good. I was out for like 5 months. And one day my parole officer called me and said that I needed to come in. When I went there and went into his office, some officers from the California Youth Authority came out of the back, cuffed me up, and took me back to the California Youth Authority.
What?
Because I had life in the California Youth Authority. So what was supposed to happen is that once I finished the 3-year sentence in California Department of Corrections, I was supposed to return back to the California Youth Authority to finish my life sentence.
What kind of sense does that make? That's insane.
It don't. And so at that point, it's like, I kind of snapped again. At that point, I said, man, fuck the law. At that point, for some reason, I started to believe that I thought it was unfair. Because I was actually doing good. I was not committing any crimes or anything. I was scared to hold a gun at that time. I was completely 180-degree different than I was at 14. And I had like a vision. I thought like, okay, if I can stick with this trade school and get this computer and electronic technology stuff under my belt. And this school was actually in Torrance in a suburb. So it's at that time, I'm starting to see more diversity, and I'm starting to
Mm-hmm.
see other things. And I started to believe, hey, look, I might be able to make something out of this, to where I can get like a good job and actually live a life outside of what I've known for the past 18 years. And so when they locked me back up right there, it kind of like devastated me. And so, I started to tell myself that, man, the only way that I was going to make it in America was to get some money. So I told myself, man, when I get out of here, I'm selling as much dope as I can. I'm finna sell as much dope as I can get my hands on, because I had made a vow that I would never
Mm-hmm.
commit another crime of violence, that I would never do another act of violence unless it was in self-defense. So I couldn't go out and rob or steal or anything like that, because when I was in solitary confinement for assaulting that prison guard, I pretty much told myself that, from that day on, the only way that I'm going to be able to redeem myself is by treating people the way that I want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that, okay, anything that I do, I'm not going to cause no harm upon somebody because to satisfy my own whims or desires. So, I pretty much live by the rule that, do unto others as you want others to do to you. And so I told myself, look, there's nothing wrong with selling drugs. It's a fair exchange, And so while I was in the California Youth Authority that second time, I kept going before the parole board because they kept giving me different little assignments. They want me to complete this program, do this program. And surprisingly, to them, I was knocking them out, because now you got to realize I'm not that same kid I was at 14 and 15.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer violent. I'm more educated now. I've been reading books. I've got my GED, so now I'm a little more sharper. And they see this. The parole board, they saw that. And so as I continue to knock out these different programs, and with the support of my youth counselor, who also seen the change in me, they kept sending me back to the parole board like every 3 months. Normally you go every year, but I was going like every 3 months because I was doing so much. And surprisingly, like a year after that, the parole board said, you know what? He's made a lot of improvement. So they let me out. But still in the back of my head, I'm telling myself, only way you're going to be somebody in America is to get some money. Because I kept telling myself that had I been rich at the time that the California Youth Authority snatched me back up, if I had money and a lawyer, I probably wouldn't have gone through that. That's what I kept telling myself, which might have not been true at the time, but
maybe not. But yeah, that just shows it just shows how broken the system is. At that point in time, they didn't care that you changed. They didn't even look at that. You've reformed yourself. They didn't care about that. That's just
yeah. And so it's like, in other words, it defeated me. That little incident right there, I can look back on it today and say that it actually defeated me. It took, because there I was a child who grew up with little hope of actually doing something productive because I hadn't seen it. And so when I had that little glimpse of hope and vision of doing something productive, it was crushed. And so that there, I told myself, like, never again, man. I don't ever try to live on that side of the law, because it doesn't work for a Black person. These are the things that I was telling myself, which, today I don't have the same attitude. But back then, as a 19-year-old kid, and the things that I've been through, without any other experiences or any guidance or mentorship, I pretty much sought the answers for my own questions, and I got them from observing my environment, and that's what I told myself.
right. So take us forward to at the age of 28, when you get arrested, and this is, I guess you hadn't been out for that long. Maybe I have that wrong, but age of 28, you get arrested. sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. It's for what was the crime then? What was the charge?
It was a possession of marijuana, which what happened was uh, federal agents had loaded had I was getting some marijuana for some guys down in Texas, and the guys had actually got hired some undercover federal agents to transport the marijuana to St. Louis, where I was at the time. They didn't know they were undercover agents. They actually thought they were truck drivers. And so when I went to go pick up the agents actually took the marijuana and put it in the back of a U-Haul van. And so when I went to go pick it up and got in the van to start it, the van wouldn't start, so they arrested me. And I was charged with possession of marijuana. And I was actually found guilty of it.
And the 35 years, that was because of your priors?
Yeah, because of the priors. Priors played a big role in the 35 years.
So you have this sentence you're convicted of. Take us through this escape that you successfully escaped from a maximum security detention facility that was monitored by camera. You were being monitored by camera, right? 24/7.
Yeah. It when I was arrested 2 weeks after the conception of my only child. She's 16 years old now. So I found out at the time of my arrest that I had a child coming into this world. And so I was devastated because I'm also facing a life sentence. And so the only thing I could think about is that history is going to repeat itself, that the cycle continues. I grew up without my father. Now my daughter, my child, is going to be born into this world without a father and repeat the cycle. And so at that point, it's just like I told myself that I was a loser. I started feeling like a loser. I tell myself that, look, if I'm in here and this child is born and I'm not able to be a father and be there for her, I'm the worst person in the world. And my pride, I didn't want to be the worst person in the world. I don't think I could live with being the worst person in the world. You know, so one day I was sitting in the cell looking out the window and I said, shit, I got to break out. I'm going to try to escape and flee the country, get my child, take her with me somewhere where I could just live and be a father for 18 years. And then after that, who cares what happens? And so I tried to escape. I actually cut the bars out of a window in the cell. Somebody told on me, so they sent me to.
How did you cut the bars?
I got a hacksaw blade smuggled in. I smuggled a hacksaw blade into the jail. Had it smuggled in inside of some confidential attorney documents. Had it concealed. You know, they're real thin. Had it concealed inside the papers. Cut the bar.
And that just cut. How long does that take to cut through bars? I would think that would take quite a while.
Yeah, it does, because you got to take in the noise factor. You want to be as quiet as you can. Then you don't want other prisoners to see you. Then you don't have a handle on these things, so you're just really working with like a little piece of a saw blade, and you know you don't have a good grip with it. So I think it took me like a little over a week, 10 days to do it, to cut that bar. A little over a week, something like that. I was caught, placed in solitary confinement. When I was in solitary confinement, I managed to get another saw blade smuggled in, cut a hole in the ceiling, got up to the ceiling, found a crawl space, found an exhaust vent, kicked it out, stuck my head out there. There was some cops down there smoking cigarettes. They looked up and I got caught, right? They took me out of that cell, transferred me to a maximum security detention facility, which happened to be the Alton jail, and placed me in a cell where I was locked in that cell 24 hours a day. There was a camera in there watching me 24 hours a day. I couldn't come out the cell for anything. I think 3 times a week they would come escort me to a shower, let me shower for 5 minutes, and take me back and put me in that cell. And I managed to get a hacksaw blade in there. And it took me a while, did a little trickery, deceiving the cameras, and had other prisoners cause distractions and on and off. And I would made like a little dummy, like I was laying in the bed and I would be in the corner behind the camera, sawing and working. And I think it took me like a little over a month and a half or something like that. I ended up getting a hole inside the ceiling. Once up in the ceiling, I was able to chisel through this other little barrier, then got up inside the attic of the jail where the ventilation system was. I made a rope out of my blankets, made a retraction device so that the rope would pull back into the vent as I fled away. And I actually got away.
So how long were you a fugitive for?
I was only a fugitive for a day. It didn't last long at all.
So, obviously at the beginning here, you have these, 3 attempted escapes. So I guess, successful escapes from prison. When did your mindset shift? Because I know that you did some really good things while you were in prison. You became a mentor, helping other prisoners with issues, and became a positive force. Eventually, you go on to study the law, learn the law, and end up working for your own release. So, what shift happened there?
Well, after I was caught for that last escape, I was sent to Supermax, federal Supermax. This was before I was even on trial. Before I had trial, they sent me to Supermax, a federal prison up in Marion. Had me locked in there with the people who were already convicted. I was the only pretrial inmate actually there. And so at that point, I realized that, the only way that I'm going to get out is through the court system. So I would spend every day studying law, reading and case law, and learning everything I could about the law as it applied to my case. And that's how I pretty much became accustomed to knowing the law. And because I was in situations where I couldn't even get mail. The only thing, I couldn't get mail, books or nothing, anything. Mm-hmm. The only thing that I had to read was law. And so that's where I pretty much developed a keen understanding of interpreting the law, because I would read case law over and over again. Sometimes I might be in a cell where the only thing I have is 1 or 2 pieces of case law, and I would read them things every day because that's the only thing I had to do. Mm-hmm. And from there, I learned how to interpret the law. And so as the years went on, and I was actually released from, in 2010, some producers in Europe contacted me about making a documentary about the escape. They thought that it was pretty ingenious the way that it happened, and the fact that the amount of work I put into it, and I was under constant observation and still was able to pull it off. So they thought it was a big deal, made a documentary about it. The documentary is titled Breakout. The documentary aired all around the world. And from that day on, I started getting letters from people all over the world who were pretty much inspired and impressed by my story.
Hmm.
To them, they didn't think that a person, from the streets of Compton and who dropped out of the 8th grade was supposed to be intelligent enough to pull off this type of escape. So to them, it was inspiring. And just getting that type of feedback from people kind of like inspired me, because now it made me feel like, maybe I'm worth more than, what I thought I was worth. Maybe that I can do something, hard work. And I looked at that escape as hard work, even though it was against the law. But it kind of taught me, like, look, if you can just, put in some hard work towards something, sometimes people will appreciate you. When you use your brains and to try to conquer things, that's when people tend to respect and appreciate you. And I think that over my entire life, that's all I had ever been wanting, is for somebody to say, look, man, I appreciate you. I appreciate the things that you've done. The things that you've done have helped me, because I didn't really do most of the things that I did for me. I did it because I wanted to impress other people. I wanted to be able to give to some people. I wanted money, not because of myself. I've never been like the flamboyant, flashy type of person. I wanted money so that, okay, when I come around, I can give it away. I can give it to people. Anything to feel like I was appreciated and respected. When I was out there gang banging and putting in work, I was doing it because I wanted to feel appreciated and respected. So when I started getting letters from law-abiding citizens and productive people all around the world who said that I was kind of like inspiring, that kind of like a switch kind of like went off in my head. Like, maybe I need to start living my life in a way where I use my brain and intellect. And that's how I'm going to be able to earn the respect of, of people. And so later in solitary confinement, people wanted to know more about my story. So I wrote a book, Chasin Freedom, and I spell it DUM. And the reason was because that I found that I had been chasing freedom the wrong way. All these years, I'm thinking that, even like before I went to jail, the void, because we do these things because there's a void within us that we want to fill. And I believe, like, okay, if I can get a whole bunch of money, I'll be free. I'll be able to escape the ghetto. I'll be able to escape police brutality. I'll be able to, escape all of this madness that I grew up in. If I can just get a whole bunch of money. And then once in prison, I'm thinking, okay, if I could just get out of prison, then I'll be free. But in all actuality, I was going about it the wrong way, because freedom is really a mind state. First thing, because you can find happiness in prison. You can find happiness anywhere on this earth if you look inside and take control of yourself and your desires. So I wrote the book pretty much giving people my life story and trying to help people understand why I was the person I was, why I did the things that I did, and what I believed it would take for me to be a better person. And hopefully that it can teach other people how to deal with people who come from environments or situations and circumstances as I did, and to help kind of reform us and help us see the direction to where we can be more productive and successful people in life. So that was my whole purpose of pretty much writing that book, is to give people insight so that they can understand, and that they can understand where we come from, why we do the things we do, and what we need to do to correct it. And
how hard is it, being in prison, you're writing a book. How hard was it to get that book published while you were still in prison?
It's nearly like impossible. You have to do everything yourself. Even like even just writing the book was hard work. The good thing about it, I was in solitary confinement. And so I had plenty of time. But even still, it took me almost 2 years to actually write that book. I would write 8, 10 hours a day.
So you were just writing it out by hand.
Just writing it out by hand with the
Yeah.
flimsy ink pen that goes out every other word. You got to bend it and beat the ink pen.
Wow.
Now I'm in solitary confinement, so it's all type of madness going around me. You got guys in the cell next door fighting with the guards, so they're shooting pepper spray and gas all on the tier. When that happens, you got to cover your face up, you're coughing, and it's just such a ruckus and violent environment. But I was able to persevere and block that stuff out because I wanted to get my story out there. Because at the time, I'm telling myself that this is it. This is the only way my story is going to get out there. And it wasn't even so much about me. It was like the pain that I was feeling, because here I am in prison with a 35-year sentence, likely never going to get out. If I do, I'm going to be very old. I have a child out there I can't be there for. And so I looked at it like my life was pretty much over. And so this book right here is the only way I want the world to know. I want the world to know what I went through, why I became the person that I was, and hopefully that people out there will understand and be able to prevent other people from having to go through the things that I went through. And so I was determined to get that book out. And so all day I would write. I'd write it, I'd finish it, I'd write it again, throw the old one away. And at the same time, I'm reading books on learning how to edit and grammar, write punctuations and grammar and all that type of stuff. And I was able to put it together. Surprisingly, it's a hell of a book. Everybody who reads it loves it. And so when the book I was actually released from solitary confinement in 2015. And I was sent to the United States Penitentiary in Canaan. And when I got there, I checked into I enrolled into this program called the Challenge Program. And the Challenge Program is a modified therapeutic community where they teach prisoners cognitive skills, rational thinking, how to change your perception so that you can change your attitude about life and the world, and start to be more in control of your destiny as opposed to perceiving things the wrong way and allowing that to frustrate you and send you down a road of self-destruction. So I excelled in that program, became a mentor, started teaching classes, developing curriculum. Even with that, I started doing some things that a lot of people were impressed by, because I was pretty much committed to it. I was still at that point to where, look, man, even though I'm in prison, my life still matters to somebody, even if it's to another prisoner, or even if, my daughter is aware of the things that I'm doing in here to help. Maybe that will make her feel a little better about this situation so that she don't look like my life was a waste or that she suffered and I didn't try to do anything productive as a result of her suffering. So a lot of driving forces was behind me that, compelled me to do everything I can to try to be great, even in them circumstances. And at the same time, I was still studying the law. So I was helping other prisoners get out of prison, get their sentences reduced. I was working with mentally ill prisoners. I was intervening in violent conflicts. I was squashing beefs amongst prisoners. I was doing all type of stuff, and it made me feel good. That's how I found my inner peace, by, trying to be as much of a humanitarian as I can, even in them circumstances. And so I self-published the book on Amazon. And shortly after that, producers in Hollywood came across the book. They read it. They fell in love with it. And they optioned it for a film, for a feature film.
And that's being made right now? Is that right?
We're going to production this year, going to production next month.
So are you going to be in the film too, or what
Well,
kind of role do you have?
I'm gonna have a cameo in there, but I don't know how to act. These are all. It's going to be a lot of big name actors in the film.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
yeah.
So I want to come back and ask you about that, but before we do that, I want to talk about you getting released, because really, I mean, this happened so recently. I mean, we're talking the beginning of this year is when you found a loophole, right? That you were able to use to get out. So can you take us through what happened there?
Well, when the First Step Act was signed into law, there was a clause. Well, let me take you back a little further too. In 1984, Reagan signed into law the Sentencing Reform Act, which abolished parole. And Congress said, well, if we abolish parole, then that means there's not any chance of anyone ever getting out of prison early. And so what they did is they included a section which was called the compassionate release. And under compassionate release, they allowed the Federal Bureau of Prisons to motion a federal judge to reduce a prisoner's sentence under what they considered to be extraordinary and compelling reasons. And Congress designated the Sentencing Commission as defining what extraordinary compelling reasons are. Mm-hmm. So fast forward to when the First Step Act was signed into law, they amended that clause and said that not only does the Federal Bureau of Prisons not only does a compassionate release motion have to be filed by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, if the Bureau of Prisons refuses to file it, the inmate himself can file it directly to the court. And so pretty much it removed the Federal Bureau of Prisons as the gatekeeper for compassionate release, because at the time, the Bureau of Prisons wasn't granting any compassionate release motions. I think they were getting like 12 a year, and most of those prisoners who were granted it were actually dying. Most of them died within days or weeks after being released. So the purpose of amending it was to broaden it a little more so that people who really deserve to be released or a little bit of compassion can actually get it. And so
it really doesn't, the intent of the law was never to be used, as people being sick or having an illness. It was, if people are actually getting reform, to show compassion and give them their freedom.
Well, somewhat like that.
Yeah.
To a degree, but not really, because they also had a clause in their phrasing it which said that rehabilitation alone is not extraordinary compelling reasons. Mm-hmm. So there had to be something else. But the thing was, they assigned the Sentencing Commission to define what extraordinary compelling reasons were. And the Sentencing Commission only gave 4 criteria. And one of them was that you were over 75 years old and pretty much couldn't take care of yourself. And the other one was that you were over 65 and you were over 75 and couldn't take care of yourself and done 2/3 of your sentence. The other one was that you were terminally ill and likely to die soon. The third one was that you are the parent of a minor, and the other parent has deceased or become incapacitated to where he or she can't actually be an effective parent to that minor child. So the Bureau of Prison was allowed to ask the judge to release you so that you can be that sole parent. And the fourth was what they consider extraordinary compelling reasons as determined by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So I didn't meet either one of those first 3, right? Because I wasn't over 75. I didn't have any terminal illness. And my daughter's mother was still alive and fully capable of being a parent. So in the fourth has to be done by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, because it says that they are the ones who determine any other reason. Federal Bureau of Prisons was not going to release me. They were not going to file a motion to ask that I be released, because the Federal Bureau of Prisons is a branch of the Department of Justice. And as we know, the Department of Justice now is pretty much their whole purpose is to put people in prison, not let them out of prison.
Pretty much.
And so, but there's a little contradiction there in that fourth clause, that fourth criterion, because that fourth criterion said that any other reason as determined by the Federal Bureau of Prisons. But now the First Step Act had amended the compassionate release statute and said that a prisoner, even if the Bureau of Prisons refused to file a motion, the prisoner himself can go to the court. So now you see how it contradicts there. Because if I can go directly to the court, then why does that fourth criterion have to be determined by the Bureau of Prisons? If the Bureau of Prisons doesn't agree or doesn't want me to be released, then I should be able, somebody else should be able to determine what those other reasons are. And so that's where the contradiction occurs. And one of the reasons why the language did not agree was because the Sentencing Commission was designated the job of defining extraordinary compelling reasons. And after the First Step Act changed the compassionate release statute, there wasn't enough judges in the Sentencing Commission to update the language of the sentencing policy. So therefore, that language remains, which contradicts the whole purpose of changing the compassionate release statute. And I think at the time, most of the judges who were on, because the Sentencing Commission is just a commission of federal judges, and they're appointed by the president. Most of them had either retired or whatever it was. They're no longer there. There's not a quorum. I think there were only 3 or 4 judges, which wasn't enough to update the policy so that it can reflect the amendment that happened with the First Step Act. And Trump never appointed any judges to the Sentencing Commission, so it was just empty for years. And so now that the Sentencing Commission isn't able to update that fourth criterion to reflect the intention of the amendment, you have a lot of judges whose job is to interpret the law. So if you have a contradiction in the law, you put it before a judge, and the judge has to interpret it. And at the time, my judge had retired. And so now I had a new judge who was Nancy J. Rosenstengel, who had been appointed by Obama, and she was a sweetheart. She was a darling. And so I said, okay, if I can put together a motion arguing that she has the authority to define what extraordinary compelling reasons mean under those other reasons, then I can ask her to find extraordinary compelling reasons based on the fact that I'm in prison for 35 years for marijuana, when marijuana is now legal in most states. And the Department of Justice is not prosecuting most marijuana offenses. And other factors was all of the good things and positive things that I had done while in prison. And so I took a chance. I put the motion together, got a lot of support from some prison officials, psychologist staff who I worked with in the program, people from out of society, put together the motion, filed it to her. She appointed a lawyer to represent me. The lawyer told me that I didn't have a chance.
Really?
She's not going to grant, you're not going to get out. You'd be lucky if we can get her to reduce your sentence to 25 years.
And how many years had you served at this
I
time?
had been in 16 years at the time. And so I'm telling him, because I read the law, I will read a case law 10 times. So I'm able to see things that he isn't able to see. He's a public defender. He probably have 30 or 40 other clients that he's working with, and he's putting a few minutes in or hours or whatever into each case. Well, I'm putting days and months into my particular case. So when he told me that and we were disagreeing, I wrote the judge and I told her, look, I appreciate you appointing this attorney, but I can pretty much hold my own here. You know, now if you want this guy to stay on to make things more effective and easily for me to easily access the court, then go ahead. But just please allow me to be the one that's in charge here. Consider my argument. Consider the things that I present to the court. And sure enough, he took my motion, changed it up, took some things out, filed it with the court. The government responded, and he opened the door for the government to win. And at that moment, I wrote the judge, say, look, get him out of the way. I'm going to take care of this myself. So the assistant U.S. attorney responded by appointing 2 other assistant U.S. attorneys to the case. And we went back and forth, and I won. July 24th, the judge granted my motion, immediate release.
That is amazing. What did that feel like when that happened? When you found out immediate release, you're getting out?
It's I mean, it was a hell of a feeling. It was a hell of a feeling. It was I can't even describe it. And sometimes today I still like ask myself, is it real? You know, and it's like it's all type. There's a lot of great things that have been happening for me, and it's like some divine things that just you can't explain them. It's how it's happening. And I'm gonna give you an example. Like,
yeah,
while this motion was pending before the court, I kept telling myself, and I kept telling other prisoners, I'm going home Friday, right? I'm telling prison, they like, man, what's up with your motion? I'm like, man, I think she's going to grant my shit Friday, and I'm going home. Friday come by. I had all my stuff packed because I'm just that hopeful and confident. I read it 1,000 times. I sensed that this judge had some compassion and that she would do it. And so I'm confident. So Friday will come, I don't go home. Monday, Tuesday, I'm saying it again, I'm going home Friday. So one Thursday, I was sitting at the typewriter typing a motion up for another prison, helping him get out of prison. And he asked me, he said, what's going on with your case? And I say, I think she's going to grant my thing tomorrow, which was Friday. 5 minutes after I told him that, the guards came out and called my name. They say, Adams, pack your stuff. You got to go to R&D. Now, at the time, R&D, the only time you go to R&D is to pick up property, to transfer, or to go home. I don't have any property. At the time, the pandemic had all transfers stopped. Nobody was being transferred in or out of the prisons. So I said, okay, this is it. She must have granted my motion. I'm finna go home. I went and grabbed all my stuff, gave it away to all the prisoners. Got like my little pictures and a little few pieces of mail and went up to R&D. When I got to R&D, they say, you're not going home, you're transferring. They all of a sudden, the BOP had decided to start transfers again, and I was the first person on the list. Now, but I'm getting transferred to a lower custody facility. But now to be transferred at the time, they would put you in quarantine before you move. You would go to quarantine for 3 weeks before you move. So
do you think that they were transferring you because you were fighting this case, because you were trying to get out? Do you think that had something to do with it?
Nah, it was really, I was going to a lower custody facility. Yeah. And you know, it was my time. I had 5 years of clear good conduct and everything I'd done. So they wanted to reward me by sending me to a lower custody facility. And So now I'm devastated. So the unit manager actually came up to R&D, and I told him, like, look, I have too much going on now. I don't want to be transferring in the midst of a pandemic. Who knows if I can catch this stuff? So I said, look, is there any way you can stop this transfer? He said, yeah, but we'd have to wait till Monday when the warden come back in and I can ask him. So I said, okay, let's do it. So he said, okay, I'll come see you Monday and we'll talk to the warden and see if he'll do it for us. So meanwhile, they took me to quarantine. I was placed in a cell. When you're in that cell, you don't come out for nothing. You don't come out for showers or anything. You don't have any cleaning supplies or nothing. It was horrible. It was worse than being out in general population. I had a better chance at catching the coronavirus in quarantine than in general population. That's how nasty and filthy this place was. So Monday, the unit manager came around and he said, Adams, you still want me to talk to the warden? And I said, you know what? Because now I'm like, sort of like, fuck it. I say, nah, I don't. Just leave it alone. Apparently, it's in the universe's cards for me to be transferred. So, nah, don't even talk to the warden. Get me out of this place. Let me just do this quarantine and get transferred to where I'm going. So 2 weeks later, on a Friday, I was sitting in the cell and I'm kind of stressing. You know, I'm asking myself, a lot of times when I'm stressing and I'm going through things, I like to ask myself, what is the meaning and purpose? Because I found that a lot of times we go through things and later on there's a meaning and a purpose for it that really is better for us. It strengthens us, and we go through things for a reason. So I'm asking myself, if this judge is going to grant my motion, why would I have to go through this? Why would I have to go through this 3 weeks of quarantine, then be transferred to another prison after I've given away all my stuff, start all over in that prison, and then she grant my motion? So I'm asking myself, maybe it's not in the cards for her to grant my motion. Maybe she's going to deny it. And maybe it's meant for me to just go to another prison, lower custody, start all over, and perhaps I even start back getting dreams of escaping again in a lower custody. That's what I'm telling myself. So maybe it's meant for me to go to this lower custody because she's not going to grant it. And when I get to this lower custody, Quante, which is my escape personality, is going to be revived, and I'm going to find a way out there. So, but I'm frustrated because I can't find any meaning for me to actually go through this quarantine, this hell for 3 weeks. So I take off my shirt and I finna do some push-ups. And it's Friday. It's about 2:30. Guard knocked on my door and say, look, man, pack up. You're going home. Hurry up. You got to get out of here right now.
Wow.
We got an order to get you out of here right now. R&D was closed. So they take me up to R&D and they're trying to find some clothes for me. And the guys who worked up there, they got to work overtime now because they got to take me to the airport. So all of these staff members are coming up here because they've never seen somebody just released like this, especially me. Everybody knew me in that prison. Nobody ever thought that I would be going home, right? You know, and so they're all coming up there. The unit manager came up there. So as I'm up there grinning from ear to ear, the unit manager came up there and he said, remember when you told me not to stop that transfer? He said, because you said that maybe it's in the universe's cards for you to go through this. That's what I told him. Say, maybe the universe want me to go through this. He showed me the judge's order. The judge's order, which was just issued, said, release him, but first make him do 14 days in quarantine. And release him immediately after he do 14 days in quarantine. So
you'd already done it.
I had just done it because of the transfer. You know what I'm saying? So so when I was sitting in that cell, like, why the fuck am I going through this quarantine? It was the universe. It was a reason. I was going through it for a reason, you know? And so it's like, it's just been like a lot of great things happening for me. And a lot of, because, I've been doing a lot of great things, and I'm confident and optimistic that things going to work out. I don't worry about things no more. Those fears that I had as a child and as a young person about money and respect and different things, I don't worry about those things anymore. I don't have any more fears. I just live life and and just do the best that I can, and try to help as many people as I can, and be respectful and productive as I can, and that makes me happy. And at the same time, I'm being rewarded for it.
Something you said a minute ago made me think. You were talking about when you were, kept telling yourself that you were going to be released on a Friday, and you're telling everyone you're going to be released on a Friday.
Yeah.
Do you believe do you believe in manifestation? Do you believe in positive affirmations and that type of stuff?
Yeah. I have no choice to. I have no choice now, because I said it and it happened. Mm-hmm. Everything that I've been saying has been happening. For real. It's been like some weird type of stuff happening for me. I told the producers in this film in 2019, I said 2020 is going to be a great year for me. And it's everything that I've been saying has been happening. So it's like, yeah, when you constantly speak things, you can speak things into existence, and you give it that energy, and it's been happening. So it's like, so that's why, like I say, I don't worry about anything. I just try to speak good things, great things into existence.
Where did you learn that? Where did you pick that up?
Probably in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you got to tell yourself certain things in order to remain sane, because it's like, either you can develop a heart of stone, or you can just remain passionate about life. And that's one thing that I refused to do in prison, was to allow that place to turn me into an animal, to turn me into a person who actually had no compassion, to turn my heart into stone. Because once that happened, there's really no reason to live anymore. And so I would always remain positive, even when I felt like it was over. I would tell myself, like, look, okay, if it's over, let's do something so that we can still exist. And so, and then once I do that, now I become a little more positive and optimistic. And that was just really, I guess, my way of keeping myself from going insane, or pretty much dying in prison.
I'll tell you what, man. I mean, that's, even people who haven't been to prison, I mean, that's good advice. I think it's good advice for any time, but especially you look at right now with the pandemic, with, you got to wear a mask everywhere. People feel like the walls are closing in on them. Things are going to get better. I think that positivity and keeping your eye, on the future, and visualizing that future, that is so important right now, because people get trapped in what's happening right now, and it can really mess with your mind.
Yeah. And like, one thing I used to always tell myself, and I learned from experience, is that things they always get better. And then another thing that we have to understand is that they can get worse also. So don't think that the situation or the circumstances of your life are just all that fucked up, because it can get worse also. So sometimes we got to just seize the moment. Wherever we are, whatever we have to make the best of it and live it. Because at the end of the day, life is short, and you may not get that moment again. So spend every moment, making the best of it, no matter where we are or what we have, and strive for better, And so
absolutely. Hey man, I've really enjoyed talking to you for the past. Been talking for an hour and 20 minutes now. This is a longer show than I normally would do, but it's worth it. I mean, you have a story to tell. But before I let you go, I'm sure sure all the listeners are still with us because because your story was so compelling. But I want you to tell people, where they can get your book, where they can find you on your website, social media, the movie, all that stuff.
You can find all that information. My Instagram is Chasin _Freedom FREEDUM. Also, you can go to my website QuawntayBoscoAdams.com, which is QuawntayBoscoAdams.com. Or you can go to my publishing company, which is designed to try to help prisoners get their stories out there. It's jailhousepublishing.com. And also ChasinFreedum.com. ChasinFreedum.com. Or you can just find me on Facebook, Bosco Quante Adams. And also, I just had to let people know that Trump did not let me out of jail. I just wanted to put that out there because a lot of people keep asking, is it Trump? Nah, it's not Trump. It was an Obama judge and my interpretation of the laws that actually got me out of prison. So,
yeah, we were talking before. I think before we started recording, but during elections, I guess during any time, we can get divided on things like that. Who's responsible for what? I mean, we all want the same thing, though. There's no reason somebody should be doing that much time, or really any time, for selling marijuana. So let's keep our eyes on that, and I think we're making progress. I mean, slowly but surely.
Yeah, we are making progress, but I think we can make a whole lot more progress. And I think it's just about us becoming committed to reform, and really committed to reform. And a lot of it starts before people even go to prison. That's my belief. But once they're in prison, understand that a lot of prisoners still are capable of change, and that if we can invest in them and help make them better people for when they hit society, and by giving them some type of hope, by not sentencing them to so much time. And, long sentences does not reform a person. I think it causes more damage than good. So, and I hope that a lot of people will start to understand that, and even understand criminal justice reform, understand the laws, because a lot of people don't understand it. Even a lot of people in prison don't understand it. And that's why we have a lot of people who assume that it's all on presidents. Presidents don't do anything but sign a piece of paper. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of this stuff is dealing with Congress. So if we really want criminal justice reform, then we have to make sure that we have the right people in Congress, and who's going to actually set these bills on the floor for a vote and actually push them through. And that's where it all comes down to. It comes down to Congress. It comes down to the House and to the Senate. And pretty much presidents are going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just hope people understand that and understand the facts and understand who's really behind criminal justice reform, and understand. And another thing that I want people to understand is that the First Step Act was not no criminal justice reform bill. It was not robust as people think it was. It did not free people from prison like people think. Most of the people who were freed from prison were actually freed only 2 or 3 months early because of the 7 days a month, 7 days a year good time that they had been robbed of for the past 30 years had finally caught up to them. And that's why we've seen so many people released, because of the First Step Act. But other than that, it was not a great bill. And hopefully we can get people together to where we can really push a real criminal justice reform bill through the Senate, through the House, and get a president to actually sign it into law, because the First Step Act was not a robust criminal justice reform bill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to end the war on drugs. I mean, you want to talk about real reform. That's what needs to happen.
Exactly, exactly. And that right there is the root of everything. If we can end this war on drugs, then we'd be surprised how things will be a lot better as far as criminal justice.
100% Quante. Well, I just want to thank you for coming on the show, and I look forward to the movie, and hopefully once it comes out, we can have you back on, and we can
Yeah, most definitely.
talk more about criminal justice reform and catch up. So thanks for coming on, man.
Man, thanks for having me, and I look forward to coming back. And hope everybody enjoyed it and continue to follow me and keep up with the story because the story continues. This is just the beginning.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, bro.